Billionaire CEO vowed never to love again, until her presence made his heart full for the first time. Eric Wilson spent 6 years making sure nothing could hurt him again. At 37, the billionaire CEO had mastered being alone. Then October 2024 brought Josephine Pearson through his door with a navy suit, unflinching honesty, and a smile that made him forget his own name. She was supposed to be there for 8 weeks. Fix his systems. Take her fee. Leave. But when she told him about visiting her mother every Sunday even though dementia stole her memories, when she sang jazz on Thursday nights like her heart depended on it, Eric felt his carefully constructed walls begin to crack. And the terrifying part? He wanted them to. Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. The last time Eric Wilson cried was at his father's funeral in 2018. He was 31 years old then, standing in the rain at Magnolia Cemetery in Charleston, South Carolina, watching them lower the only person who ever believed in him into the ground. 6 years later, in October 2024, he still hadn't shed another tear. Not when his engagement ended 3 months after that funeral. Not when Wilson Maritime Holdings hit $1 billion in valuation. Not when he stood alone in his penthouse overlooking Charleston Harbor, watching couples walk hand in hand along Waterfront Park while he ate takeout at his desk. Again. Eric turned 37 last month. His assistant sent him a card. That was it. He told himself he preferred it this way. Emotions were liabilities. Love was a risk he'd already decided wasn't worth taking. His father taught him to build empires. His ex-fiancée taught him that empires were all he'd ever really have. The October morning started like every other. Eric woke at 5, ran 4 miles along the Battery, showered, and arrived at his office by 7. Wilson Maritime Holdings occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated warehouse building on Concord Street, all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. His empire. His kingdom. His very expensive, very empty kingdom. "Your 8 o'clock is here," his assistant Rachel announced through the intercom at 7:58. Eric didn't look up from his computer screen. "Send them in. It's just one person. The consultant from Pearson Logistics. She's early." Fine. He heard the door open behind him. Still didn't turn around. Just kept scrolling through the maritime shipping reports that proved what he already knew. His company was hemorrhaging efficiency in their coastal distribution channels. Every consultant he'd hired in the past 8 months had promised solutions and delivered nothing but recycled corporate speak and invoices. "Mr. Wilson, I appreciate you taking this meeting." The voice made him pause. Not sultry or trying too hard. Just clear. Confident. The kind of voice that didn't apologize for taking up space. Eric turned in his chair and immediately forgot every prepared dismissal he'd been rehearsing. She stood in the center of his office, and somehow the entire room reorganized itself around her. Navy blue suit that meant business, no nonsense. Natural hair pulled back in a way that looked both professional and effortless. Dark skin that caught the morning light coming through the windows. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Deep brown, direct, looking right at him like she could see past the billion-dollar net worth straight through to the man who ate alone every night. She was beautiful. That was obvious. But beautiful women came to his office every week. This was something else. Something that made him forget what he was about to say. "I'm Josephine Pearson." She crossed the space between them, hand extended. "Most people call me Josie." Eric stood, suddenly aware he was staring. Her handshake was firm. Warm. Her hand fit in his for exactly 2 seconds before she pulled away, but he felt it for several seconds longer. "Eric Wilson." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Though I assume you knew that." "I did my research." She smiled, and it was real. Not the practiced smile he got from people who wanted something. "Your distribution network is choking your profit margins. Your coastal routing system is using protocols from 2019. And based on your third-quarter reports, you're losing approximately $2.3 million annually in delayed shipments alone." Eric blinked. Every other consultant had started with small talk, compliments about his success, careful navigation around his reputation as the youngest billionaire CEO in Charleston's maritime industry. This woman just walked into his office and told him his baby was broken. He should have been offended. Instead, he found himself sitting back down and gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "You have my attention." Josie sat, pulling a tablet from her leather portfolio. "I'm not here to waste your time with surface-level analysis. I spent the last 3 days mapping your entire supply chain. Your problem isn't your ships or your crews. It's your communication infrastructure. You're using 4 different tracking systems that don't talk to each other. Your warehouse in Mount Pleasant is operating on software that your facility in North Charleston can't access in real time. You've built an empire, Mr. Wilson, but your empire is speaking 4 different languages. For the next 20 minutes, Josie walked him through a presentation that made every other consultant he'd hired look like they'd been playing at business. She knew his company better than some of his own managers. She'd identified problems he'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. And she'd done it all with a directness that should have put him on the defensive but instead made him lean forward in his chair, actually engaged for the first time in months. So that's my assessment, she finished, setting down her tablet. The question is whether you actually want to fix it or whether you just want to keep hiring people to tell you everything's fine. Eric almost laughed. Almost. You always this direct with potential clients? Only the ones who can handle it. She met his eyes. Can you? Something shifted in his chest. Something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Something dangerously close to interest. Not just professional interest. The kind that made him notice the way she tilted her head slightly when she spoke. The way her fingers drummed once against her tablet when she was making a point. The way she looked at him like he was a puzzle worth solving instead of a bank account worth accessing. Your proposal. Eric cleared his throat. What's your timeline? 6 months for full implementation. 3 months to start seeing measurable improvements. Josie pulled up another screen on her tablet. I work on-site for the first 2 months. Embedded with your team. Then remote support for the remaining 4 months. 2 months. She'd be here, in Charleston, working with his company for 2 months. Eric told himself the small spike of satisfaction he felt was purely professional. And your fee? She named a number that was high but fair. Then added, results-based. If I don't improve your efficiency by at least 15% in the first quarter, you don't pay the second half. Eric studied her. 34, maybe 35 years old based on the resume Rachel had sent him. Though he hadn't looked at it closely, too burned out on consultants to bother. Josephine Pearson, owner of Pearson Logistics Consulting. Featured in Forbes last year for revolutionizing supply chain management for mid-sized companies. Grew up in Charleston, left for college, came back 5 years ago. Came back. That detail snagged on something in his mind. People who came back to Charleston did it for a reason. Why did you leave Atlanta? The question came out before he could stop it. Too personal for a business meeting. Josie's expression shifted. Just slightly. The confidence remained, but something softer moved underneath it. My mother needed me. She was diagnosed with early-onset dementia in 2019. My father passed when I was 30, back in 2021. So I came home. Eric's chest tightened. He knew that particular grief. The shape of it. I'm sorry. Thank you. She didn't look away. Didn't deflect. Just held his gaze with the kind of honesty that most people couldn't manage in a business meeting. She's in a good facility now. Memory care unit near Somerville. I visit her every Sunday. She doesn't always know who I am anymore, but I'm there. Every Sunday. Eric couldn't remember the last time he'd committed to anything that didn't come with a profit margin. Your father, Josie said quietly. I read about him when I was researching your company. James Wilson. He built the foundation you've expanded. Lost him young. 6 years ago. Eric didn't talk about his father. Not with business associates. Not with friends, because he didn't really have those anymore. Not with anyone. But something about the way Josie said it, the recognition of loss in her eyes, made the words come easier. I was 31. Thought I had decades left with him. I was 30 when I lost my dad too. Josie's voice was soft but steady. Thought the same thing. That there was time. There's never as much time as we think. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that happened when two people recognized something in each other. Some shared understanding that didn't need explanation. Eric's phone buzzed. Rachel's name on the screen. He ignored it. So. He leaned back in his chair, trying to find his footing in something that suddenly felt like more than a business meeting. You fix my company, I pay you a substantial amount of money, and in 6 months we part ways. That's the plan. And if I said no? Josie smiled. Then I'd wish you luck finding someone else who'll tell you the truth instead of what you want to hear. She stood, extending her hand again. But I don't think you're going to say no, Mr. Wilson. I think you're tired of people who waste your time. I think you're ready for someone who'll actually fix the problem. She was right. On all counts. Eric stood, taking her hand. That same warmth. That same fit. When can you start? Monday. 8 a.m. Make it 7. I want you meeting with my operations team first thing. Josie's smile widened. 7 it is. She was halfway to the door when Eric heard himself say, Josie. She turned back. Thank you. For the honesty. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Or recognition. You're welcome, Eric. She used his first name. Not Mr. Wilson. Just Eric. And the way she said it made him feel like a person instead of a position for the first time in longer than he could remember. The door closed behind her. Eric stood in his office, looking out at Charleston Harbor, at the empire he'd built, at the city he'd conquered, and felt something he'd stopped letting himself feel 6 years ago. Curiosity. About another person. About what her laugh sounded like. About what stories lived behind those eyes. About whether she drank her coffee black or sweet. About whether she felt even a fraction of what he'd felt when their hands touched. His phone buzzed again. Rachel, reminding him of his 9 o'clock. Eric picked it up, but his mind was already on Monday morning. On 7 a.m. On seeing Josie Pearson walk back into his office and challenge him again. He'd vowed never to love again after Elizabeth left. After his father died and he realized that caring about people just meant giving them the power to destroy you. He'd built walls. High ones. Effective ones. But Josie Pearson had walked into his office, looked him straight in the eye, and made him wonder if maybe, just maybe, those walls weren't protection. Maybe they were just prison bars he'd built himself. Eric pulled up her company profile on his computer. Pearson Logistics. 5-star reviews from every client. Reputation for brutal honesty and flawless execution. A woman who'd left a thriving career in Atlanta to come home and care for her mother. Who visited every Sunday even when her mother didn't remember her name. That took strength. The kind that came from actually feeling things instead of running from them. His intercom buzzed. Eric, your 9 o'clock is waiting. Cancel it, he heard himself say. Cancel it? You've had this meeting scheduled for 3 weeks. Reschedule. Something came up. What came up was the unfamiliar need to sit in the quiet of his office and process whatever had just happened. To understand why a 30-minute meeting had left him feeling more awake than he'd felt in years. Outside his window, a couple walked along the Battery, the woman's hand tucked into the man's arm. Eric used to look away from scenes like that. Reminders of what he'd decided he didn't need. Today, he watched. And wondered. Monday was 3 days away. For the first time in 6 years, Eric Wilson was counting down to something that had nothing to do with quarterly reports or board meetings. He was counting down to seeing her again. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Monday morning arrived with fog rolling off Charleston Harbor, wrapping the city in soft gray light. Eric stood at his office window at 6:30, coffee in hand, watching the Battery emerge from the mist. He'd been here since 6. Told himself it was because he wanted to review the operations reports before the morning meeting. Told himself it had nothing to do with the fact that Josie would walk through his door in 30 minutes. He'd thought about her all weekend. Saturday morning during his run. Saturday night when he sat alone at Peninsula Grill, surrounded by couples celebrating anniversaries and birthdays. Sunday afternoon when he drove past Waterfront Park and remembered her saying she visited her mother every Sunday. This was ridiculous. She was a consultant. A business arrangement. Nothing more. The elevator chimed at 6:55. Eric's pulse kicked up. He set down his coffee, straightened his tie, then immediately felt foolish for it. When had he started caring about his appearance for a Monday morning operations meeting? The knock on his door came at exactly 7. Come in. Josie entered carrying a leather bag over one shoulder and 2 cups of coffee in a cardboard carrier. She wore gray slacks and a white blouse, her hair down today, falling in natural curls past her shoulders. The sight of her did something to his breathing. Good morning. She set one of the coffees on his desk. Black, 2 sugars. Rachel mentioned that's how you take it. Eric stared at the cup. You brought me coffee. Seemed polite since I'm about to spend the next 2 hours telling your operations team everything they're doing wrong. Josie smiled. Consider it a preemptive peace offering. He picked up the cup. Still hot. She'd timed it perfectly. Thank you. You're welcome. She settled into the chair across from his desk like she'd been doing it for years. So, fair warning. Your operations manager Tom is going to hate me by 8:30. He's been running things the same way for 12 years, and I'm about to suggest we rebuild his entire system. Tom's been with the company since my father started it. Eric sipped the coffee. Perfect. How did she know exactly how much sugar? He doesn't adapt well to change. I know. I read his file. Also talked to 3 people who've worked under him. Josie pulled out her tablet. He's loyal, thorough, and completely stuck in 2015. But he loves this company. So I'm not going to tell him he's wrong. I'm going to show him how to be more right. Eric found himself smiling. Actually smiling on a Monday morning. You've done this before. Dealing with territorial operations managers who think consultants are corporate buzzword machines coming to steal their jobs? Once or twice. She met his eyes. I'm good at my job, Eric. But I'm also good at understanding that people aren't just obstacles to efficiency. They're humans who've built their identities around their work. Change that, and you're asking them to change who they are. Something in his chest shifted. She got it. The human element that most consultants treated as an afterthought. The reality that his company wasn't just numbers and logistics. It was Tom, who'd stood beside his father for 20 years. It was Rachel, who remembered how he took his coffee. It was the warehouse crew in Mount Pleasant who'd sent flowers when his father died. What? Josie tilted her head. You're looking at me like I said something surprising. Most consultants don't talk about the people. They talk about optimization and restructuring and maximizing human capital. Human capital. Josie's expression shifted into something almost amused. You mean people? Yeah, I prefer to call them what they are. Probably why I don't get invited to a lot of corporate strategy seminars. Eric laughed. Actually laughed. The sound felt foreign in his own office. Josie's smile widened. There it is. Rachel told me you used to laugh more. Before. Eric's humor faded slightly. Before his father died. Before Elizabeth left. Before he decided that caring about anything beyond the company was a weakness he couldn't afford. Rachel talks too much, he said, but there was no edge to it. Rachel cares about you. There's a difference. Josie stood, gathering her tablet. Operations meeting starts in 5 minutes. You ready to watch me make enemies with your longest tenured staff? Looking forward to it. They walked to the conference room together, and Eric found himself acutely aware of the space between them. Close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. Something warm. Not overpowering. Just present enough to make him want to lean closer. The operations meeting went exactly as Josie predicted. Tom bristled at her suggestions. The logistics coordinator got defensive. The IT manager looked ready to argue every point. And then Josie did something Eric had never seen a consultant do. She listened. Not the performative listening that came before someone launched into their prepared speech. Real listening. Taking notes. Asking follow-up questions. Acknowledging concerns instead of dismissing them. When Tom insisted that the current routing system worked fine, Josie didn't argue. She pulled up data showing exactly where it worked and exactly where it failed. When the IT manager said integration would be impossible, she asked him to walk her through the specific obstacles, then problem-solved with him in real time. By 9:30, Tom was nodding along. By 10, the IT manager was volunteering solutions. By 10:15, the entire team was collaborating on implementation strategies. Eric watched it happen, impressed in a way he hadn't been impressed by anything work-related in years. She'd walked into a room full of skeptics and turned them into allies in 90 minutes. The meeting ended just before 11. The team filed out, actually energized instead of resentful. Tom stopped by Eric's chair on his way out. I like her, he said quietly. She's direct. Your father would have appreciated that. Eric felt the familiar ache at the mention of his father, but it was softer today. Less sharp. Yeah, he would have. When the room cleared, Josie was still at the whiteboard, marking notes on the implementation timeline. Eric stood, moving to stand beside her. That was impressive. She glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. Did you think I was bluffing when I said I was good at my job? No. But there's good, and then there's whatever that was. You turned Tom into a believer in 90 minutes. I've seen consultants try for months and fail. Josie set down the marker, turning to face him fully. They were close now. Close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. Close enough to notice the small scar above her left eyebrow. Want to know the secret? She said softly. Please. I actually care. Not just about the systems or the efficiency metrics. About the people. About what this company means to them. She held his gaze. About what it means to you. Eric's throat tightened. When was the last time someone had said something like that to him? When was the last time someone had looked past the net worth and the reputation and seen the person underneath? Lunch, he heard himself say. Let me take you to lunch. Josie blinked. Is that standard procedure for client relationships? No. Which is why I'm asking. Eric knew he should backtrack. Keep it professional. Maintain boundaries. All the rules he'd set for himself 6 years ago. But standing this close to her, seeing the way she looked at him with genuine curiosity instead of calculation, those rules felt less like protection and more like cowardice. There's a place on East Bay. Fleet Landing. Right on the water. Best she crab soup in Charleston. I know Fleet Landing. A smile tugged at her lips. Grew up here, remember? So is that a yes? Josie studied him for a long moment. Eric felt exposed under that gaze. Like she could see every wall he'd built, every defense mechanism, every scar from 6 years of choosing safety over connection. One condition, she finally said. Name it. This stays separate from work. When we're talking about your company, I'm your consultant. Professional boundaries, clear lines. She paused. But lunch? That's just two people who both lost their fathers too young, both understand what it's like to build something from grief, sharing a meal. Agreed. Eric's chest felt tight. She understood. Not just the logistics of his business or the efficiency of his operations. She understood him. The parts he didn't show anyone. Agreed. Fleet Landing sat right on the Charleston Harbor, a converted naval building with outdoor seating that overlooked the water. Eric requested a table on the pier, and they sat in October sunshine that felt more like late summer, pelicans diving for fish while sailboats drifted past. Josie ordered the she crab soup he'd recommended. Eric got the same, along with fried green tomatoes and sweet tea for both of them. So, Josie said once the waiter left. We're not talking about work. That was the deal. Which means you have to tell me something real about Eric Wilson the person, not Eric Wilson the billionaire CEO. Eric leaned back in his chair. That's a tall order. I'm not sure there's much difference anymore. I don't believe that. She sipped her sweet tea. Nobody's just their job. Not even workaholic maritime tycoons who show up to the office before sunrise. You showed up before 7 this morning. With coffee and a strategic plan to win over your operations team. Totally different. She smiled. Come on. Give me something. Hobbies? Secret talents? Embarrassing childhood dreams? Eric thought about deflecting. He'd gotten good at that over the years. Keep conversations surface level. Never give people enough to actually know you. But something about the way Josie looked at him, open and genuinely interested, made him want to try. I rebuild old boats, he said. In my garage. 19th century Charleston singles, mostly. Sailboats that were rotting in someone's backyard. I buy them for nothing, spend months restoring them, then donate them to the Maritime Museum. Josie's eyes widened. Seriously? Why would I make that up? I don't know. It's just so different from the image. Billionaire CEO spending his weekend sanding wood and replacing rigging. She leaned forward. How long have you been doing that? Since I was 16. My father taught me. Said if I was going to run a maritime company someday, I needed to understand boats from the keel up. We'd spend Saturdays in the garage, working on whatever project he'd found. Eric smiled at the memory. After he died, I couldn't go in there for a year. Then one day I walked in and there was this half-finished schooner sitting there. The last boat we'd worked on together. So I finished it. And then I found another one. And another. You're finishing what you started with him, Josie said softly. Yeah, I guess I am. The waiter arrived with their soup. For a few minutes they ate in comfortable silence, watching the harbor traffic. Eric couldn't remember the last time silence with another person felt easy. Usually he filled quiet with business talk, safe topics, anything to avoid the intimacy of just existing together. My turn? Josie asked. Fair's fair. I sing. Jazz standards, mostly. Every other Thursday at a little bar in the French Quarter. Nothing fancy. Just me and a piano player named Marcus who's about 70 and plays like he's channeling Duke Ellington. She grinned. Population of the audience varies between 8 and 25 people, depending on whether there's a Clemson game on. Eric tried to imagine her on stage. Had no trouble at all. What made you start singing in bars? My mom. Josie's expression softened. Before the dementia, she had this incredible voice. Used to sing at church every Sunday. Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, all the greats. When she got diagnosed, I promised myself I'd keep that alive. So I sing. Even though I'm not half as good as she was. Even though some nights I'm singing to 6 people who are mostly focused on their beers. I sing because she can't anymore. The grief in her voice was gentle but present. Eric recognized it. The kind that didn't go away but learned to live alongside joy. I'd like to hear you sometime, he said. Josie met his eyes. Yeah. Her smile did something to his pulse. Made it forget its usual steady rhythm. They spent the next hour talking. About Charleston, about growing up here, about leaving and coming back. About the parts of the city that changed and the parts that stayed stubbornly the same. Josie told him about Sunday visits with her mother, the good days when recognition flickered in her eyes, the hard days when she called Josie by her sister's name. Eric told her about the first year after his father died. About Elizabeth leaving 3 months after the funeral, saying she'd signed up to marry a man, not a ghost. About realizing he'd built his entire life around work because it was the only thing that didn't require him to feel anything he couldn't control. That sounds lonely, Josie said quietly. It is, Eric admitted. The honesty surprised him. But lonely safer than the alternative. Is it though? Josie tilted her head. Because from where I'm sitting, safe just looks like another word for alone. Her words hit something deep in his chest. True in a way that made him want to argue and agree simultaneously. His phone buzzed. Rachel, reminding him of his 2 o'clock meeting. Eric glanced at the time. 1:15. They'd been here for over 2 hours. It felt like 20 minutes. I should get you back, he said, even though every part of him wanted to cancel the afternoon and stay here, talking to this woman who somehow made him feel seen for the first time in years. Probably. But Josie didn't move. Eric? Yeah? Thank you for lunch. For talking. For being honest. She paused. I know that's not easy for you. How did she know that? How could she read him so clearly after knowing him for less than a week? They drove back to the office in Eric's car, and the silence between them felt charged with something neither acknowledged. When they pulled into the parking garage, Josie reached for the door handle, then stopped. Next Sunday, she said. I'm singing at Prohibition. 8 o'clock. If you want to come, I'd like that. If you don't, I understand. No pressure either way. Then she was gone, walking toward the elevator before Eric could respond. He sat in his car, engine off, hard doing things it hadn't done in 6 years. She'd invited him. Not to a business dinner or a networking event. To watch her sing jazz standards in a bar in the French Quarter. To see a part of her life that had nothing to do with logistics consulting or efficiency metrics. To see her. Eric pulled out his phone, opened his calendar. Sunday night was blank. Sunday nights were always blank. He typed in the address. Prohibition. 8 o'clock. Then he sat there, staring at his phone, wondering when he'd become the kind of man who was terrified of a simple invitation from a beautiful woman who made him laugh. Wondering if maybe it was time to stop being that man. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. By Thursday afternoon, the second week of October, Eric had convinced himself that going to hear Josie sing was a terrible idea. Professional boundaries existed for a reason. She was consulting for his company. Getting involved beyond that was reckless, foolish, the kind of decision that led to complications he'd spent 6 years avoiding. He'd also confirmed with Rachel 3 times that he had nothing on his calendar Sunday night. Josie had been at Wilson Maritime for 9 days. In that time, she'd reorganized their entire coastal routing system, implemented new communication protocols between warehouses, and somehow made Tom actually excited about software updates. She was brilliant at her job. Focused. Professional. And every time she walked into a room, Eric forgot whatever he'd been thinking about. Wednesday morning, she'd leaned over his shoulder to show him something on her tablet, and he'd caught that warm scent again. Lost his train of thought completely. Had to ask her to repeat herself twice while trying not to notice how close her hand was to his on the desk. Thursday at lunch, she'd laughed at something Tom said in their progress meeting, and the sound had done something to Eric's chest that felt dangerous and necessary all at once. This was becoming a problem. Eric stood at his office window Thursday evening, watching the sun set over Charleston Harbor, when his phone rang. Elizabeth's name on the screen made his stomach tighten. He hadn't heard from his ex-fiancée in 3 years. Not since she'd sent a brief email congratulating him on the Forbes feature. He stared at the phone for 2 more rings before answering. Elizabeth. Eric. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Her voice was exactly as he remembered. Smooth, measured, the kind of polished tone that came from years of cotillion and debutante balls. What do you need? A pause. He'd been more polite once. Before she'd left him 3 months after his father's funeral, saying she couldn't compete with a dead man for his attention. I'm in Charleston. Just for the weekend. I was hoping we could meet for coffee. Why? Does there need to be a reason? We were engaged once, Eric. We spent 4 years together. Can't old friends have coffee? They weren't friends. They were 2 people who'd built a relationship on compatible social circles and convenient timing, then watched it crumble under the weight of real grief. But Eric found himself saying, tomorrow. 1 o'clock. Carmela's on Broad Street. Perfect. I'll see you then. She hung up before he could change his mind. Eric set down his phone, feeling unsettled in a way he couldn't name. Elizabeth was his past. A past he'd made peace with years ago. Her call shouldn't matter. But it did. Because for the first time since she'd left, he'd started imagining a different future. One that included late lunches at Fleet Landing and jazz music on Thursday nights and a woman whose presence made his too-quiet life feel suddenly full of possibility. A knock on his door pulled him from his thoughts. Come in. Josie entered, tablet in hand, stopping when she saw his expression. Bad time? I can come back. No. Just a phone call I wasn't expecting. Eric gestured to the chair. What's up? She settled into the seat, but her eyes stayed on his face. Reading him with that unnerving accuracy she'd developed. You look upset. I'm fine. Eric. She set down the tablet. Remember our deal? When we're not talking about work, we're honest. So I'm asking as a friend, not your consultant. What's wrong? Something in Eric's chest loosened. When was the last time someone had asked him that and actually wanted to know the answer? My ex-fiancé called. Wants to meet for coffee tomorrow. Josie's expression shifted, but Eric couldn't read it. The one who left after your father died? He'd told her about Elizabeth during their lunch at Fleet Landing. Just the basics. Engaged for 6 months, together for 4 years, ended badly after his father's funeral. That's the one. Do you want to see her? Eric considered the question. Honest answer? I don't know. Part of me is curious what she wants after 3 years of silence. Part of me thinks it's a bad idea. What does your gut say? That I should cancel. But I already said yes. Josie was quiet for a moment, her fingers drumming that single beat against her tablet that meant she was thinking. Can I ask you something? Always. Do you still have feelings for her? The question should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt necessary. Like Josie was asking because the answer mattered to her personally, not just out of polite curiosity. No, Eric said, and realized it was completely true. Whatever I felt for Elizabeth ended when she walked out. I'm not angry anymore. Just indifferent. Then maybe meeting her will give you closure. A chance to see that you've moved on. Josie held his gaze. Or maybe it'll remind you of why you built those walls in the first place. She understood. The walls. The fear underneath the indifference. The careful distance he maintained from anything that could hurt him. Sunday, Eric said. I'm still planning to come. To Prohibition. If the invitation's still open. Josie's smile was slow and genuine. It's open. 8 o'clock. Fair warning, though. I get nervous before I sing. So if I'm weird when you get there, that's why. I don't think you know how to be weird. Oh, you'd be surprised. I once reorganized a client's entire inventory system and then had a panic attack in their bathroom because I was convinced I'd gotten the algorithm wrong. I hadn't, but still. Weird happens. Eric laughed, and the tension from Elizabeth's call eased slightly. This was what Josie did. Made him feel lighter. Made the weight of his too serious life feel manageable. I should let you get back to work, Josie said, standing. I just wanted to update you on the Mount Pleasant integration. We're ahead of schedule. Of course you are. She paused at the door. Eric? About tomorrow. Whatever happens with your ex, remember that who you were 3 years ago isn't who you are now. People change. You're allowed to have changed too. Then she was gone, leaving Eric standing in his office, wondering how she always knew exactly what he needed to hear. Friday afternoon at Carmela's, Elizabeth looked exactly as Eric remembered. Blonde hair styled perfectly, designer dress, the kind of understated elegance that came from old Charleston money. She'd always been beautiful in a classic way. The kind of woman who looked right on his arm at charity galas and business dinners. Looking at her now, Eric felt nothing. No residual attraction, no old wounds reopening. Just mild curiosity about why she'd called. You look good, Elizabeth said as he sat down. Success suits you. Thank you. You look well too. The waiter took their order. Coffee for both. The silence that followed felt awkward in a way that proved how little they'd actually known each other. I heard about the Forbes feature, Elizabeth said. Youngest billionaire CEO in Charleston's maritime industry. Your father would be proud. The mention of his father from her lips made Eric's jaw tighten. She'd barely known James Wilson. Had attended exactly 2 family dinners before the engagement, always finding excuses to be elsewhere. What are you doing in Charleston, Elizabeth? She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. I'm getting married. In December. We're having the ceremony at Middleton Place. Congratulations. His name is Robert Ashford. Investment banking. We met 2 years ago in Atlanta. She paused. I wanted to tell you in person. It felt wrong for you to hear it from someone else. Eric sipped his coffee, processing. She'd driven 3 hours to tell him she was marrying someone else. I appreciate that. But you didn't need to make the trip. I'm happy for you. Are you? Elizabeth studied him. Because when we were together, you were never happy, Eric. You were driven and successful and brilliant at what you did. But happy? I don't think I ever saw that. The observation stung because it was accurate. He hadn't been happy with Elizabeth. Comfortable, yes. Compatible on paper, absolutely. But happy? No. Things change, he said. Do they? She leaned forward. I've thought about us a lot over the past 3 years. About why it didn't work. I used to think it was the timing. That if your father hadn't died, we would have made it. But that wasn't it, was it? No. We were never right for each other. Not really. We were what our families expected. What looked good. What made sense. Elizabeth's expression softened. But we never had what matters. That spark. That thing that makes you want to talk until 3 in the morning. That makes you rearrange your whole life just to spend more time with someone. Eric thought about Josie. About lunches that stretched 2 hours. About finding excuses to stop by her temporary office just to hear her thoughts on something. About confirming 3 times that Sunday night was clear on his calendar. "I'm glad you found that with Robert," he said quietly. "I am too." Elizabeth paused. "Have you found it with anyone?" The honest answer was complicated. He'd found someone who made him want to find it. Someone who made the possibility feel less terrifying than it had in 6 years. But whether Josie felt the same, whether anything could actually happen between them, that was uncharted territory. "Maybe," Eric admitted. "It's new. Complicated. I'm not sure yet." Elizabeth smiled. "Good. You deserve that, Eric. You deserve someone who sees past the empire to the person. Someone who makes you want to be more than just successful." They finished their coffee talking about surface things. Her wedding plans. His company. Mutual acquaintances from their shared past. When Elizabeth left, she hugged him briefly. "Be brave," she whispered. "Don't let fear make your decisions." Eric drove back to the office thinking about those words. Fear had been making his decisions for 6 years. Fear of loss, of vulnerability, of caring about someone enough that losing them could destroy him. It had kept him safe. It had also kept him alone. Saturday, Eric worked on the boat in his garage. A 1920s sailing sloop he'd been restoring for 8 months. Sanding wood, replacing hardware, losing himself in the rhythm of manual labor. His father had taught him that boats required patience. That you couldn't rush the process without compromising the integrity. Relationships were probably the same way. By Saturday evening, Eric had accepted the truth he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. He had feelings for Josie. Real ones. The kind that made him want to take risks he'd sworn off. The kind that made tomorrow night at Prohibition feel monumentally important. The kind that terrified him completely. His phone buzzed. A text from Josie. "Still planning on tomorrow? No pressure if you changed your mind." Eric stared at the message. This was his out. He could make an excuse, maintain professional distance, protect himself from potential hurt. Instead, he typed, "Wouldn't miss it. 8 o'clock. Her response came quickly. "Good. I'd be disappointed if you didn't show." She'd be disappointed. Which meant his presence mattered to her. Which meant maybe he wasn't alone in whatever this was becoming. Eric set down his phone and went back to work on the boat, Elizabeth's words echoing in his mind. "Be brave. Don't let fear make your decisions." Tomorrow night, he'd walk into a bar in the French Quarter and watch Josie sing. He'd take one small step toward something that felt like hope. And maybe, if he was very lucky, she'd meet him halfway. The boat could wait. Some things were worth the risk of getting hurt. Some things were worth being brave for. Sunday morning, Eric woke with his stomach in knots. He went for a longer run than usual, trying to burn off nervous energy. Spent the afternoon reviewing reports he'd already read twice. Changed his shirt 3 times before settling on simple. Dark jeans, navy button-down, nothing too formal. At 7:30, he stood in front of his mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Nervous. Hopeful. Alive in a way he hadn't been in years. At 7:45, Eric got in his car and drove toward the French Quarter, toward Prohibition, toward whatever came next. Toward Josie. And for the first time in 6 years, he wasn't running from possibility. He was driving straight toward it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Prohibition occupied a narrow building on a cobblestone side street in the French Quarter, the kind of place tourists walked past without noticing. Eric arrived at 7:55, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. Through the frosted glass door, he could hear piano music, low conversation, the clink of glasses. He almost turned around. Almost got back in his car and drove home to his empty penthouse where feelings couldn't ambush him and vulnerability couldn't leave scars. Instead, he opened the door. The interior was all exposed brick and low lighting, intimate in a way that made the 20 or so people scattered at small tables feel like a crowd. A piano sat in the corner, and behind it, a man with silver hair and kind eyes played soft jazz that filled the space like smoke. Eric scanned the room and found Josie immediately. She stood near the bar, talking to a woman with bright red lipstick, wearing a deep green dress that caught the low light. Her hair was down, curling past her shoulders. She was beautiful in a way that made Eric forget how to breathe properly. Then she saw him. Her face transformed. Relief and happiness and something that looked like nerves all mixing together. She said something to the woman beside her, then crossed the room toward Eric. "You came," she said softly. "I said I would." "I know. But I wasn't sure you'd actually show." She smiled, but he could see the tension around her eyes. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." The piano player called her name. Josie's expression shifted to something close to panic. "That's my cue. I have to go. But stay? Please. I'm not going anywhere." She squeezed his hand once, quickly, then walked to the small stage area. Eric found a table near the back, ordered whiskey he didn't particularly want, and watched as Josie took the microphone. "Good evening," she said, and her voice was steadier than he expected. "I'm Josie. This is Marcus. We're going to play some songs that are older than most of you and all of me. If you feel like listening, wonderful. If not, the bar's got excellent bourbon." Scattered laughter. Marcus played the opening notes of something Eric didn't recognize. Then Josie began to sing. Her voice was nothing like he'd imagined. Richer, deeper, full of emotion that made his chest ache. She sang like she meant every word, like the lyrics were personal truths instead of standards written decades ago. The room went quiet, conversations pausing, people turning to actually listen. Eric couldn't look away. She sang about love and loss and longing. About hope and heartbreak and holding on. And when her eyes found his across the room during a song about second chances, Eric felt something crack open inside him. Something he'd kept carefully locked for 6 years. He was falling for her. Had been falling since she'd walked into his office 2 weeks ago and told him his empire was broken. Maybe even before that, in some theoretical way, just waiting for her to exist in his life. And it terrified him completely. Josie sang 4 songs. By the time she finished, the small crowd was applauding genuinely, a few people calling for an encore. She declined gracefully, thanked Marcus, then made her way back to Eric's table. "So?" She slid into the chair across from him, still slightly breathless. "Honest opinion. And I'll know if you're lying to be nice. You're incredible." Eric's voice came out rougher than intended. "Your mother would be proud." Josie's eyes went bright. Yeah. They sat there for a moment, the weight of something unspoken hanging between them. Then Josie's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and Eric watched her expression change. The light dimming, worry creeping in. "Everything okay?" "It's the care facility. My mother's having a difficult night. They asked if I could come." She stood, already gathering her things. "I'm sorry. I know you just got here, but I need to go. I'll drive you." "Eric, you don't have to do that." "I know. I want to." He stood, placing cash on the table for his untouched whiskey. "Let me do this." Josie looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. Thank you." The drive to Somerville took 30 minutes. Josie was quiet, her fingers twisting together in her lap. Eric wanted to say something comforting but couldn't find words that didn't sound empty. So instead, he reached over and took her hand. She held on tight. Peaceful Memories Care Facility was exactly the kind of place that tried too hard to not look institutional. Warm colors, landscape paintings, soft music playing in common areas. But underneath the careful decoration was the reality of what this place was. Where people came when their minds betrayed them, when families couldn't manage care alone. Josie led Eric down a hallway to room 217. Through the half-open door, he could hear someone crying. Not loud, just steady, heartbroken weeping. "Ma," Josie said softly, entering. "It's me. It's Josie." Eric stayed in the doorway, watching as Josie approached a woman sitting in a chair by the window. Even in distress, he could see the resemblance. Same bone structure, same graceful hands, same eyes. "I want to go home," Josie's mother said, looking at her daughter without recognition. "Please, I want to go home. I don't know where I am." "I know, Ma. I know." Josie knelt beside the chair, taking her mother's hands. "You're safe. You're at Peaceful Memories. You've been here for 3 years now. Remember? We picked out that quilt together, the one on your bed." "I don't remember. I don't remember anything. Who are you?" Eric's chest constricted watching Josie's face. The pain there, carefully controlled but present. Having to reintroduce yourself to your own mother, over and over, never knowing if this time she'd remember. "I'm Josie. Your daughter. You used to sing to me when I was little. Ella Fitzgerald songs. Summertime was my favorite." Something flickered in the older woman's eyes. "Summertime? Yeah, Ma. You want me to sing it for you?" Josie's mother nodded, still crying but quieter now. And there, in a care facility room in Somerville, Josie sang the same way she'd sung at Prohibition. Full of emotion and love and a grief that made Eric have to look away. By the second verse, her mother had stopped crying. By the end of the song, she was humming along, some deep memory surfacing through the fog of dementia. "You have a beautiful voice," she said to Josie. "Just like my daughter. She sings too." "Does she?" Josie's voice cracked slightly. "Oh yes. She visits every Sunday. She's a good girl. You'd like her." Josie closed her eyes briefly. "I'm sure I would." They stayed for another hour. Eric watched from the doorway as Josie talked to her mother about nothing important. The weather, the food at the facility, a cardinal that had been visiting the bird feeder outside. Her mother drifted in and out of lucidity, sometimes asking Josie's name 3 times in 5 minutes, sometimes sharing crystal-clear memories from 40 years ago. Finally, a nurse came to help her mother get ready for bed. Josie kissed her forehead. I'll see you next Sunday, Ma. Will you bring your daughter? The one who sings? Yeah, Ma. I'll bring her. In the hallway, Josie's composure cracked. She leaned against the wall, covering her face with her hands. Eric moved without thinking, pulling her into his arms. She came willingly, pressing her face against his chest, her shoulders shaking with silent tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I don't usually fall apart like this. Don't apologize. Never apologize for this. It's just so hard. Every week I hope she'll remember. And every week I have to accept that she won't. That the mother who raised me, who sang at my high school graduation, who taught me how to be strong, that version of her is gone. And what's left is this woman who thinks I'm a stranger. Eric held her tighter, his own eyes burning. He understood loss. But this was different. This was losing someone in increments, watching them disappear while they were still alive. You're the strongest person I know, he said quietly. Coming here every Sunday even when it breaks your heart. Singing to her even when she doesn't remember teaching you those songs. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done. Josie pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I don't feel strong. I feel exhausted. You can be both. They stood there in the hallway, and Eric became aware of how close they were. How her hands rested against his chest. How she was looking at him like he was solid ground in an earthquake. Eric, she whispered. He knew what was about to happen. Knew he should step back, maintain boundaries, protect himself. All the rules he'd followed for 6 years. But Josie was looking at him like he mattered. Like his presence here tonight meant something. And Eric was tired of being safe. Tired of being alone. Tired of letting fear make his decisions. He lowered his head, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she rose on her toes, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first. Tentative. Then Josie's hand slid up to his neck and Eric forgot how to think. She tasted like hope and possibility and everything he'd convinced himself he didn't need. He pulled her closer, 6 years of loneliness condensing into this single moment of connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Josie rested her forehead against his. That probably wasn't smart, she said. Probably not. We work together. There are professional boundaries. Complications. I know. But I've wanted to do that since our lunch at Fleet Landing. Eric's heart stumbled. Yeah. She stepped back, but kept her hand in his. Take me home? They didn't talk much on the drive back to Charleston. Josie gave him directions to a small house in the Cannonboro-Elliottboro neighborhood, all historic charm and oak trees. Eric pulled into her driveway but didn't turn off the car. Thank you, Josie said. For driving me. For staying. For being there tonight. Anytime. I mean that. She leaned across the console, kissing him again. Slower this time. Deliberate. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. I need to figure out what this means. For us. For the project. I don't want to mess up your company because we can't keep our personal and professional lives separate. We'll figure it out, Eric said, meaning it. Together. Josie smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'll see you tomorrow. She got out of the car, and Eric watched her walk to her front door, unlock it, disappear inside. He sat in her driveway for a long moment, his lips still tingling, his heart doing things it hadn't done in years. He'd kissed Josie Pearson. Had held her while she cried. Had promised they'd figure this out together. And for the first time since his father died, Eric Wilson had let himself hope for something beyond the empire he'd built. The question was whether that hope would save him or destroy him. Eric drove home through empty Charleston streets, touching his lips, remembering. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his building's garage. A text from Josie. I don't regret tonight. Any of it. Just so you know. He stared at the message, then typed back, neither do I. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Good. See you tomorrow, Eric. Tomorrow. Monday morning. Back to professional boundaries and consulting projects and pretending that everything hadn't just changed. Eric rode the elevator to his penthouse, walked into his too-quiet living room, and stood at the window overlooking Charleston Harbor. The same view he'd had for years. But tonight, it looked different. Tonight, it looked like possibility. He just hoped he was brave enough to reach for it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next. Now let us continue. Monday morning felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Eric arrived at the office at 6:30, an hour earlier than usual, unable to sleep. He'd spent most of the night replaying Sunday. The kiss. The way Josie had felt in his arms. The promise they'd made to figure this out together. Now, in the cold light of Monday, that promise felt more complicated. Josie arrived at 7 sharp. Eric heard the elevator chime, heard her footsteps in the hallway, felt his pulse kick up. When she appeared in his doorway, professional in navy slacks and a cream blouse, hair pulled back, he couldn't reconcile this version with the woman who'd kissed him in a care facility hallway. "Morning," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "Morning." They stared at each other for a beat too long. Then Josie stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk about Sunday," she said. "Agreed." She sat in the chair across from his desk, the same chair she'd occupied a dozen times over the past 2 weeks. But everything felt different now. Charged. Uncertain. "I meant what I said," Josie began. "I don't regret what happened. But I've been thinking about the complications. About what it means for the project, for your company, for both our reputations if this goes wrong." Eric's chest tightened. Here it came. The careful retreat. The responsible decision to maintain professional distance. He'd been expecting it. Had spent half the night preparing himself for it. And he managed. "And I think we need to be honest about what we want. Not what's responsible or professional or safe. What we actually want." She held his gaze. "So I'll go first. I want to see where this goes. You and me. I want to have dinner that isn't about logistics. I want to know what makes you laugh besides my terrible jokes about supply chain management. I want to take this risk even though it scares me." Relief flooded through Eric so intensely he had to grip the armrests of his chair. "I want that too. But I also want to do this right. Which means we need clear boundaries. During work hours, I'm your consultant. We keep it professional in front of your team. No favoritism, no conflicts of interest. After hours, we figure out what this is." "Agreed." Josie smiled, and the tension in the room shifted from anxious to something warmer. "Okay then. Now that we've established that, I should probably tell you about the final implementation phase. We're ready to integrate the Mount Pleasant and North Charleston systems. It's the last major piece." Just like that, they were back to business. Discussing timelines and protocols and efficiency metrics. But underneath the professional conversation, Eric felt the hum of possibility. The knowledge that tonight, or tomorrow, or whenever they were away from this office, they could be something other than CEO and consultant. They could just be Eric and Josie. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt both natural and extraordinary. During the day, Josie worked with his team, implemented her systems, turned his company into the efficient operation he'd always known it could be. She was brilliant, professional, exactly what he'd hired her to be. After hours, they had dinner at tucked-away restaurants. Walked along the Battery at sunset. Sat in his garage while he worked on the schooner, Josie asking questions about restoration techniques while Sanding would beside him. She came to hear him talk at a maritime industry panel and asked the most challenging question of the evening. He went to Prohibition every Thursday night, sitting at the same back table, watching her sing like she was performing just for him. They talked about everything. His father's legacy and the weight of living up to it. Her mother's good days and bad days. The businesses they'd built from grief and determination. The futures they'd stopped letting themselves imagine. They kissed goodnight in her driveway, in his car, once against the door of his penthouse when she came up to see the harbor view. But they didn't rush. Both of them understood that what they were building required patience. Foundation before structure. Trust before vulnerability. By early November, Josie's initial 2-month on-site period was nearly complete. Her systems were running flawlessly. Efficiency was up 18%. Tom had stopped calling her the consultant and started calling her Josie, who saved our operations. The project was succeeding beyond anyone's expectations. Which meant her time in Charleston was ending. The thought sat in Eric's chest like a stone. She'd transition to remote support soon. Would still technically work for his company but from her home office. No more daily meetings. No more stolen moments in the hallway. No more casual coffee runs that turned into hour-long conversations. He'd known from the beginning this was temporary. Had told himself he could handle it. That whatever they built could survive distance and changing circumstances. Now, facing the reality of her absence, Eric wasn't sure of anything. Thursday night, the first week of November, Eric sat at his usual table at Prohibition watching Josie sing. She wore dark red tonight, her hair down, and when she sang a Billie Holiday song about love and leaving, her eyes found his. After her set, she slid into the chair beside him instead of across from him. Close enough that their shoulders touched. "You've been quiet all week," she said softly. "Just thinking." "About?" Eric considered deflecting. Then remembered their deal. Honesty, even when it was uncomfortable. "About you leaving. About what that means for us." Josie was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that too. And I don't want this to end just because the on-site phase is finishing. But I also don't know how to make it work long-term when my business is here and your company needs you here and we're still figuring out what we even are to each other." There it was. The practical reality neither of them had wanted to address. Eric took her hand under the table, threading their fingers together. "What if I asked you to stay?" he said quietly. "Stay in what sense?" Stay working for Wilson Maritime. Not as a consultant. As our permanent director of operations. Full salary, benefits, equity stake. Tom's talking about retirement next year anyway. The position would be yours. Josie turned to look at him fully. Eric, I have my own company. I can't just abandon my other clients because we're involved. I'm not asking you to abandon anything. I'm asking if you'd consider a permanent role here. You could still take outside consulting projects. We build the position around what you need. He paused. I'm asking because you're brilliant and my company needs you. But I'm also asking because I need you. And the thought of you not being here every day makes me realize how much I've come to depend on your presence. That's a lot of pressure to put on a professional decision. I know. And if the answer is no, I'll understand. But I had to ask. Josie stared at their joined hands. Can I think about it? Of course. They left Prohibition separately, maintaining the careful privacy they'd established. But later, Eric's phone buzzed with a text. Come over? I don't want to be alone tonight. Eric drove to her house in Cannonboro, his heart racing. When she opened the door, still in the red dress from the bar, he saw something in her expression that looked like decision. I can't take the job, she said without preamble. Eric's stomach dropped. Okay. Not because I don't want to work with you. Not because the offer isn't generous. But because if I take that position, it needs to be because it's right for my career, not because we're involved. And right now, I can't separate those two things clearly enough to make that call. I understand. But. She stepped closer. I've been thinking about something else. About what I want. About what I'm afraid of. And I realized that I've been so focused on keeping my business independent, on maintaining my own identity, that I've been using it as an excuse not to get too close to anyone. Eric's breath caught. Josie. After my dad died, I threw myself into work. Built my company from nothing because it was the one thing I could control when everything else felt chaotic. And it's been good. Successful. But lonely. She took his hands. You asked me to stay. And I can't give you an answer about the job. But I can tell you that I want to stay for you. That what we have is worth rearranging my life for. That scares me, but it also feels right in a way nothing has in years. Eric pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. I'm scared too. I haven't let myself care about someone like this since my father died. Since Elizabeth left. I've been so afraid of loss that I've been choosing loneliness instead. But you make me want to be brave. Then let's be scared together. Josie kissed him softly. Let's figure this out as we go. No job offers motivated by feelings. No decisions based on fear. Just honest conversations about what we both need. I can do that. They spent the night talking on her couch. About logistics, yes, but also about futures. About what it would look like if she finished the consulting project remotely but stayed in Charleston. About whether Eric could step back slightly from the day-to-day operations, hire someone else for Tom's eventual replacement, make space for a life outside Wilson Maritime. About Sunday visits to see her mother and Thursday nights at Prohibition and slow Saturdays in his garage restoring boats together. About building something real. As November moved into December, they found their rhythm. Josie transitioned to remote support for Wilson Maritime while taking on 2 new consulting clients in Charleston. Eric hired an operations manager to start training under Tom, a sharp woman from Savannah who reminded him of Josie in her directness. He started leaving the office by 6 most days. Started saying no to networking events that felt obligatory rather than meaningful. Started building a life instead of just an empire. 3 weeks before Christmas, Eric took Josie to Sunday dinner at Fleet Landing, the same place they'd had their first lunch. The restaurant had strung lights along the pier, and the December evening was unusually warm, allowing them to sit outside overlooking the harbor. I have something for you, Eric said after they'd ordered. Josie raised an eyebrow. We said no Christmas gifts yet. This isn't a Christmas gift. It's something else. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket. Not ring-sized. Longer. Josie took it carefully, opening it to reveal a vintage compass on a silver chain. The kind sailors used decades ago. Eric, this is beautiful. It belonged to my father. He gave it to me when I took over the company. Said it was a reminder that even when you feel lost, there's always a way to find true north. He paused. You're my true north, Josie. You walked into my life when I was so lost I didn't even realize it anymore. You made me remember what it feels like to hope. To want something beyond success. To believe in futures instead of just quarterly reports. Josie's eyes were bright with tears. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know what you mean to me. That this isn't casual for me. That I'm all in. She set down the compass carefully, then moved around the table to sit beside him. I love you, she said quietly. I've been trying to find the right moment to tell you, but there isn't a right moment. There's just the truth. I love you, Eric Wilson. Your intensity and your kindness and the way you sand boat would like its meditation. I love how you show up every Thursday to watch me sing. How you held me while I cried in that hallway. How you're learning to build a life instead of just a business. Eric's throat was tight. I love you too. So much it terrifies me. But I'm done letting fear make my decisions. He kissed her there on the pier at Fleet Landing, while boats drifted past and Christmas lights sparkled and the city he'd always called home felt full of possibility for the first time in years. When they finally pulled apart, Josie was crying and laughing simultaneously. So what now? Now we keep building. Together. One day at a time. I like that plan. They stayed on the pier until the restaurant closed, talking about everything and nothing. About the boat Eric was finishing in his garage and whether Josie wanted to help him donate it to the Maritime Museum. About Thanksgiving with her mother, who'd had a good day last Sunday and remembered Josie's name for almost an hour. About the future they were creating, imperfect and uncertain but theirs. 6 months later, on a warm June evening in 2025, Eric stood in his garage beside the completed schooner. Josie had helped him sand the final boards, paint the name on the hull in careful letters. Second chance, they'd called it. For his father, yes. But also for themselves. Josie came up behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. You ready to let it go? Tomorrow they'd transport the boat to the Maritime Museum. Another project finished. Another piece of his father's legacy honored. Yeah, I'm ready. Good. Because I have news. Eric turned to face her. What kind of news? The kind where Middleton Place is available for weddings next spring. If we wanted to book it. Hypothetically speaking. Eric's heart stopped. Are you asking me what I think you're asking me? Josie grinned. Depends. If you think I'm asking whether you want to marry me, then yes. That's exactly what I'm asking. Eric laughed, pulling her close. Aren't I supposed to be the one asking? We've never done anything the traditional way. Why start now? Fair point. He kissed her, then pulled back. Yes. Absolutely yes. Let's book Middleton Place. Let's get married next spring. Let's build this whole life together. Even though I'm bossy about supply chain logistics? Especially because of that. They stood in the garage surrounded by boat restoration tools and sawdust, planning a future neither of them had thought possible a year ago. Eric thought about the man he'd been in October 2024. 37 years old, successful, alone, convinced that safety was better than connection. That man had been existing, not living. This man, the one holding Josie Pearson and planning a wedding and learning how to be brave, he was finally alive. I love you, he said. I love you too, Josie replied. Now come on. We have a wedding venue to call and a boat to celebrate and a whole future to plan. Eric let her pull him toward the house, toward the life they were building, toward everything he'd stopped believing he deserved. His father had taught him to build empires. Josie had taught him to build happiness. And he was finally learning that happiness was the better investment. Outside, Charleston Harbor sparkled in the evening light. Inside, Eric Wilson held the woman he loved and